Diálogos. I'm Gabriela Watson-Burkett. Welcome back. This is episode 10.
Wow, qué emoción, right?
Sí, pasó rápido, ¿no?
Yeah, sí. I'm Vicky Diaz-Camacho. Today, we are going to meet artists who use their platforms to amplify community ideas and issues. But first, let's get into what's on our radar. So when I think of what's on my radar in terms of art and its role in kind of social change and social movements, I think back to this movement called Taller de Gráfica Popular, which was an art movement in Mexico where they used printmaking as a way to communicate things. So it was talking about anti-militarism, organized labor, fascism, and how that for me illuminates this power of the arts to communicate through various barriers, regardless of like, do you read the newspaper? No, but you saw the poster. You know what I mean? So I think that's really cool. And then obviously because I'm a Mexican, I think of Periódico de Ayer, the song, and how song was also used in Puerto Rico, the plenas, to communicate what's going on in your community, in your pueblito, you know? So as we start thinking about the social change that's happening in our communities in Philly, throughout the world, art is at the forefront. It's communicating something and it's trying to get to everyone, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Art has always been in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you mentioned music, it
Right?
immediately remind me of Ruben Blades, who is, one of my parents' favorite that I grew up with. We're just passionate about the lyrics, right?
Yep.
And it's so descriptive of what's going on in the community,
Yep.
the problems, and then there are so many others, right?
Yeah.
For me as a filmmaker, I saw so many other filmmakers that portray their communities with passion, but also trying to get some sort of justice. Here in Philadelphia, there is so much art,
Yeah.
right?
Everywhere. You see it everywhere you walk, right?
Yes.
And that's something that was really telling for me when I moved here. I'm not sure if it was the same for you, but like everything was so vibrant when you see someone depicted on a wall, and you can actually resonate with them. Did you experience that at all?
Yes, for me, it was also the music everywhere and just the subway. You have music, people
Right.
singing, and talented folks.
Yep.
In the streets, people singing during summer, people singing.
Well, without further ado, let's get into our hot topic of the month, art for social change.
Love that. And to kick us off, we have our first guest, right? We're so excited to have here Erick Barragán Ramírez, a journalist, producer, and host of Cinepamina, a program dedicated to film analysis, pop culture, and independent cinema. Welcome, Erick.
Thank you very much for having me here. And it feels unusual to be seated in another place than my regular seat. So thank you very much for this invitation.
Claro que sí. Yes. Well, I wanted to start our conversation with something that you said recently in your experiences at a film festival. So you, upon returning to Philly, came with a, quote, renewed understanding of cinema's role in gathering community. So say more about this and what does that mean?
Well, I have been living in Philly, in the surroundings of Philly for 8 years. And I feel like simply being sitting here is part of like a networking and is a connection and a community that is between Latinos, people who they are dedicated to produce and create. So when I started back like 2 years and a half, more or less, there have been people like creating spaces to create open spaces for creation. The first hand that helped me was Edgar Ramirez for Latinos Radio. So I want to talk about movies, and I want to have a space. I could do it on my own, but there are limitations on doing things on your own. There are limitations on having like a computer, like a camera, a platform like StreamYard, a studio. So the fact that somebody else was behind the computer and started producing your show and help you to gain trust is a game changer. And in the terms of the film community here in Philadelphia, this has been an amazing year for me. Actually, I have been able to cover 2 festivals in Philly. It is like a result of like helping hands, and like there are a lot of organizations that have resources that can share the resources with you.
That's really, really cool. And I think it's important for Latinos to be represented in the film space, right?
It's really interesting the part of Latino, right? Because I was born and raised in Mexico City, and you don't know what to mean to be Latino until you get out of because in Mexico I'm Mexican, and I start being Latino when I get in touch with you, and I become community, and we are not exactly the same, but there are things that bind us.
Similarities, yeah.
Yeah, they bind us and connect us. And there is an amazing situation in which, being out in the United States, we start helping us each other, even probably more than we were in our own countries. And that's a really special connection.
I love that you are a film critic. You know, we were talking that film industry, the media industry needs more diversity.
Yeah.
Right. So you are filling that gap. I want to know why is it important to create that space to talk about Spanish language film here in the city?
Well, overall, because there are actually great filmmakers in this city. Were developed in the United States or they were imported, like from others, from Mexico, from other countries. There is a colleague that I'm working with, Moronioka. She is Afro-Mexican American, so she has this amazing film, and everything is original. It is kind of like it is relevant, and it's not just trying to adapt a thing or tropicalize a thing. It is something that is relevant to her and to their community, and to be a Latinx meets for her in their own context.
Since we have Erick here, I want to know your favorite film. Erick and Vicky.
Oh my gosh. This is so hard for me.
From this year,
See? That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
From this year?
yes, and living in Philly, I think watching M. Night Shyamalan films.
Yes.
I don't know if I pronounced the last name correctly. It's Shyamalan. Okay, he's great. Overall, there are some films that I enjoy a lot, but The Sixth Sense is amazing.
I love that one.
Yeah.
I also love horror films.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one,
Yes,
Vicky.
it is a really good one. It's not one of my favorites. I will say, thinking in the last few years, I'll say one that was formative for me in reaffirming my highly sensitive self and my overthinking capabilities is I Heart Huckabees. I'm not sure if you've seen that one, but it's about existential detectives, right? And so it's Lily Tomlin is in it, Dustin Hoffman is in it. We've got Mark Wahlberg and Jason Schwartzman. Those are all some of my favorite actors. And it really is nice because it dismantles the idea of what it means to be successful and put together and having the perfect life, right? And I think that in society today, there's so much pressure to have it all together. This film kind of breaks that down and showing that we're all kind of broken pieces, sometimes fitting, what we can in the world and trying to do some good stuff. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. The other one that I love is a Colombiano kind of film, Ya no estoy aquí. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, it's really good.
Ooh, it's powerful and beautiful.
And unexpected because it shows a side of Mexico that I even don't know. And I know Mexico, but that side of Mexico, when I watch that film, does that exist? And I start Googling. It is like a kind of Chicano cumbia, but it's really underground. Well, overground because they are in the mountains of Monterrey. It is a great film. Actually, I really recommend it.
Gorgeous.
Yes. For me, it's hard to pick two, as a filmmaker. Buena Vista Social Club, the documentary by Wim Wenders, right? And I remember that watching this documentary on screen, which is unusual for us to go to a documentary, and just being fascinated by these Cuban musicians and
So cool.
feeling so connected.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Erick, for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. If at some point you want to hear from me or you're going to contact me, I think Instagram is a really good way.
Perfecto.
Look for me on Cinepamina. It's great for me, or YouTube. I'm happy to have you around.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
art has long been a method to keep people informed about what's going on in the world and in their neighborhoods. It is both culturally significant and socially relevant. Here in Philly, we see visual representations across the city of leaders who have pushed for changes in education, policy, and social justice. I mean, I see the murals everywhere. I saw it on Lehigh. I see Puerto Rican, really cool people who have pushed for change. So, murals are painted by local artists, which is really, really cool. And they're helping to tell the story and raise awareness of these important figures.
Yes, I do love the murals. And sometimes when we see all the arts, we ask ourselves, how can we measure the benefits of arts? Right? So, thinking about that, the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance launched a tool called Social Impact Database. They launched it in December, and it shows how local arts organizations tackle issues from education, mental health, any kind of social issues, and they had the information from 50 local organizations, and they found that those organizations itself impact 700,000 people in the city. So it's just a little representation. Imagine if we had all the organizations inputting their numbers so we could see the impact.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And we'll have to keep track of all that. In the studio with us today are artists who also use their Skilled platforms as ways to illuminate the narratives and topics they want their followers to know more about.
One of them is Alex Shaw. He's a Philadelphia percussionist, sound artist, composer, and educator. He blends global percussion traditions with innovative sound, directs community-focused projects, and has produced dozens of performances and cultural programs. He also is a 2024 Philadelphia Cultural Treasures Fellow, and Alex is recognized for his impact as an artist and cultural leader in the city. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
Very cool. And another incredible artist we have with us today is Prince De León, a Liberian-born artist based here in Philadelphia. Her work blends painting, woodwork, and mixed media to explore identity, resilience, and belonging. Another kudos to you, a 2025 Mural Arts Black Artist Fellow. Prince uses art as, quote, a way to heal and connect communities through creativity. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. To kick it off, what for you is the role of the arts within each of your respective communities? Whoever wants to go first, you can mull it over.
I think that the role of arts is a way that can activate community, can have a really strong political efforts, as well as offer opportunities for artistic expression, creative expression, and to pass traditions of knowledge intergenerationally as well.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think art for me, within that sense, I think it's like a bridge to sort of bring communities together from different backgrounds, cultures, race, whatever it may be, and for people to find their place of belonging. That's what art did for me. And then also just, I think, to feel safe in my being as a human. So
I think for me, art has been a very personal journey, but through my artistic journey, it's been a way for me to also build community and build network, and to develop a deeper understanding of my potential and the ways in which I can activate other beings through my energy and through art as a vehicle for transformation.
Well said.
And I love that you guys both resonate a lot with the word belonging, right? In the way that it's connected to your arts. And because it resonates with my practice as well as a filmmaker. And I had an aha moment that made me start to think about becoming a filmmaker. When I saw Malcolm X, the film from Spike Lee, it was very transformative because it was powerful, the narrative, right? It's beautifully captured, and it was so informative. Growing up in Brazil, we didn't see a lot of representation of positive blackness on screen. So looking at that film, it was that moment that I said, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker and allow people to activate their sensations and also learn, because I felt like I didn't know anything about Afro-Brazilian history.
Right.
So I wanted to know from you guys if you guys had a similar moment that it was so transformative that it was inspiring for you to start your career. And if you don't, what made you start your career?
I grew up, watching when I immigrated from Liberia when I was 4 years old. So I feel like I've always been cradling being an African immigrant and also being an African American in America. And I remember, there was a lot of bullying and just, I guess, othering that I went through, especially from actually African American kids. But I would find my sense of belonging in watching a lot of television. I watched so much. Back in the day, my grandmother would have the VHS, so I'd watch a lot of Disney movies and just replay them. And I think my imagination was also really forming the seed of my creativity, because me imagining myself in those characters or through those characters and feeling like, I remember it was like, I don't know what specific movie, but it was kind of like a mix of all of them. And I was like, well, there's friendship, there's love, there's family. And at that time, I didn't have that. And I think to imagine that really made me feel like, I know, like, somewhere in the future I can have this, or I can create this for others. So not having that and, growing up and then going to school, I was like, I want to see more Liberian artists in mainstream media, especially when the rise of Afro beats and everything started taking its like form, and people were like, oh, slapping fufu on TikTok and everything. I was like, oh, well, I want to have a voice in that as well, because my culture, I've always been African. I've always been Liberian. So how do I also represent for other Liberians as well?
I love that. I love that you talked about how your imagination was activated. I think for me that's a really important part of my story. I grew up in a family where music was central. I grew up around musicians, but in a different way. As growing up mixed race, the struggle with the othering, I think, was constantly present. And for me, music was a portal to be transported, to sonic worlds near and far. And I think through those portals, it opened up not only my, the possibilities of how I could imagine myself, but I also was really interested in learning about communities and community-based traditions that I was not familiar with necessarily. And so through music, it became a portal into really garnering a deeper understanding of different cultural perspectives. But the music is what really activated my imagination, and it was a liberating space for me. It was a place where I could imagine myself, differently, and I could not be bound by some of the constraints I felt like I was dealing with at that time in my life.
Wow. And what I'm gleaning from both of you is this idea of kind of towing the lines of different identities, right? Like you're straddling different parts of yourself and examining and exploring that through your work, which is pretty powerful. And that also resonates with me as a Mexican Puerto Rican raised on the US-Mexico border, right? Just kind of understanding how we navigate the world and how we see it and how we experience it, right? So for you, when you think of how your identity, and I love that you also fold in additional cultures that you are not a part of, but you are really intrigued by, I want to know kind of the process behind your work and what goes on in the minds. Like, can you paint us that picture so that our audience can kind of learn about each of you?
Yeah, I take in a lot of imagery. I'm constantly like, I love a good Pinterest board. I be
I love
swiping on the Pinterest. I think because, like I said, I grew up with so much television and music as well. Like I love Afro beats, music, different artists. Yeah, I take in a lot. And then because I went to University of the Arts, I actually went to University of the Arts for animation. And then I changed my major to painting. In the beginning, it was like I wanted to work at Pixar and I wanted to show a Liberian girl, like pounding fufu on, that would be so cool as an animation. But, I respect animation, but it is not for me. So I transitioned I took a semester where I was just taking graphic design, woodworking, everything. And then I found my way into painting, and I felt like that was a way I didn't only have to paint on a canvas, I could merge all these different materials. So, like, when it comes to my creative process, I love woodworking, and I love using different things like rice and resin together, because of the histories that also sort of connect not only the imagery but the viewer to the history that these materials have. So when I'm thinking about wood, I'm thinking about how wood is constantly alive. With resin and rice, I'm thinking about, with resin, it's like who gets to sort of preserve what, and what does that mean? So imagery, it's not only about the image for me. It's like I want people in this world where people are constantly taking in images, as well as someone who also takes in images. I think going to galleries and seeing paintings is so much more profound. So I want my viewer to look at my image and be like, how the hell did she put rice in there? Why is this lentil bean in there? Like, what does that mean? Not only the beautiful image, but what is it saying? So I think that's why a lot of my pieces are visceral. A lot of them use a lot of different things, because I want people to have a visceral experience. So
Nice. Thank you for sharing.
It's interesting because a lot of my work recently has been collaborative. So I think that even though I just did a solo work, which I can talk about in a moment, I think a lot of my process is about listening. And of course, that goes hand in hand with being a musician, but I think the deeper listening, the ways in which, sounds that are not necessarily conventional as music, can also tell story, can give a sense of place, can be in conversation with one another. I think, as a percussionist, I've expanded, my sense of like listening and just being aware and being conscious of the, actively listening to the world around me. It's something that as an educator, I also encourage my students to do, right? Because we're taught in a lot of, to prioritize certain senses. We're taught certain ways, to make meaning of certain things. And this is with any medium, right? So, but in terms of sound, for me, it's also about opening up the possibilities, like, the story could be wide open. So I do sometimes my practice is creating stories through sound and inviting audiences to really, go on their own journey. But I love working collaboratively with other artists, theater artists, film, etc. And so how can I then also be in support of that story, and what are ways in which I can bring elements together. If I'm creating a piece on my own, I like taking disparate elements and like finding ways to weave them together, whether that's through like different time and meter, or whether it's like texturally different. So yeah, these are some of the ways in which I really enjoy the artistic process. But for me, education and performance and research, all these things are kind of like woven throughout and constantly informing each other.
That's so cool.
Great. And also another commonality that we see in both of the work that you guys do, it's Black identity, right? Navigating that Black identity, Black culture, Afro-diasporic influence, right? But you also have a different way of doing that. For me, it's fascinating, as I was telling Vicky, how Alex dives into Afro-Brazilian culture, Afro-Brazilian music, when he's not from Brazil, guys. I am from Brazil. So I love that people from other, parts of the world enjoy our music. And also I can resonate a lot with Prince's work, as she brings the nuance of Black identity, right? Like you're an immigrant as well. There's a lot of immigrants in the city, and that changes how we look at that identity. Can you guys talk more about how that comes through your work?
Yeah, a lot of my work is just like about representation. Like I said, if I had, as a little girl, saw more dark skinned African women being, showcased as they are now. Like Lupita Nyong'o in 12 Years a Slave, just amazing, talented, creative people. That would have changed my whole I guess self-esteem, like made me have more confidence in myself. And I think these are things people are still constantly navigating. It's just now through technology and in different ways. So for me, it's just like I want to create not only for my younger self, but for other kids, maybe even, in the future, my own kids, to see just the nuances of being Black. And I think I do that especially within research. I remember when I was in school, a lot of the histories that was being taught to was a lot of like whitewashed, Renaissance, this painter is this. And you saw the thing about it, it was like the Black people or the slaves or whatever, they were always sort of in the shadow of their predecessors almost. And I always thought that was interesting. And I also, when I was growing up here, when people would talk about African people, it was always like, oh, feeding the kids in Africa, and you would see kids with big stomachs, poverty. And I hated that, being called things like African booty scratcher really upsetted me. But it's funny because now that enriches my work, because I just wanted to showcase African people being. So I studied people like, Carrie James Marshall or Jennifer Packer. There's this beautiful film photographer, Sade Kuta from Bamako. And I was like, this man was taking pictures of Black people in his country in the 1950s. I'm like, why is this not in our history? Why aren't kids being taught about this? So I think that for me is like, I want kids, so anyone to not only look at an image and see themselves, but to question, well, how am I being represented? How am I seeing people like me? And what does that mean? And how can I take from that and also, find my place of belonging and also represent myself? So yeah, I think it's very impactful to represent the diaspora, being African and also being a person raised in America. It's hey, we have more power, so let's take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Prince.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, I think these are really complex questions, and I love the layers that you're asking. In the piece that I most recently performed and created, Pearls of Our Dragon, was part of a production called Philly Asian Futures, presented by Philadelphia Asian Performing Artists. It was a production which 9 different Asian artists are working to share, to do storytelling in different media. Part of what I wanted to present was this triangulation of storytelling with sound and music and with a tea ceremony. But I think one of the critical moments in that particular production was talking about the cultural dissonances in my life and the ways in which that has activated my work, my artistry, but also the ways in which I've been activated as and came into Afro-Brazilian music and culture as a young person, and just being so overtaken by what I was feeling and not having the information at the time to really understand in the way that you can get access to now. This is like pre-internet times, right? And so I'm learning about place and space and people and time through sound. And so when I talk about the imagination, right? So that was just step one. I think that as I've become deeper in my 20, 30 years journey through working through this as an educator, it's also been really important as a non-native practitioner to recognize and to develop what I call an integrity practice, right? And so yes, we can all be captivated by things that, maybe we don't know or didn't necessarily grow up with, but if you're gonna be committed to a life process, developing relationship with these cultural forms, with these traditions, with these lineages, it's super important to know the history, know the lineages, recognize and be transparent about your own positionality, and then recognizing what your responsibility is inside of that, because these are community-based forms. So I'm mixed race. My mother's from Hong Kong, and my father's white from the States. And so I came up in musical traditions that were, primarily Western classical traditions, but through the music, through capoeira, through samba, and these other traditions that are prevalent in different Brazilian communities regionally, for me that was really a space where I was able to, again, not only realize certain aspects about my own creativity and be activated individually, but also became a place where I could activate community through the legacies and the lineages of what these are for, right? And for me, it's really about, okay, what is the reciprocity in this? It's not just about, oh, I enjoy this, I'm going to take this on, I'm going to make money off of this or whatever, but it's like, what's the relationships that you're building, both between you and the traditions and also laterally with relationships with other culture bearers and other community members. And so for me, that's why the education goes hand in hand with being an artist, being a performer, or being a culture producer. And it's an ecosystem that I enjoy wearing multiple hats, but it's a process that, it constantly, understanding when there's moments you need to step back, when there's moments where you take the resources, the access, the privileges that you have, and you create a platform for other people, for your colleagues. Yeah. And so this, to me, is really about reciprocity and integrity, not just about how much you enjoy or how much you're individually activated, because this is a collective tradition that stands on the shoulders of people that have been doing this work for generations.
Yeah, for sure.
And under very difficult conditions. So that's a bit of how I think engaging in these sort of folk or traditional forms, right? What the art is not separate from life and from the cultural things that inform that process. So it's not siloed off somewhere else. It's complete, it's comprehensive. So you don't just engage in one facet of it, because the way that people walk and talk is the way that they play that music. The way they play that music is the way they move the body. The way they move the body is the way they eat their food and cook. So all of these things inform each other. And so for me, I feel like an honored guest and like invited. And so I also have to understand what's my role and responsibility inside that room.
That's beautiful. And it also speaks to your profession as a musician, because I think of, first, second, third chair. I was a former band nerd, by the way.
I feel you.
So when you step in, when to take a breath,
Yes.
what's your role? Are you the rhythm player, or are you coming in and doing little jazz solo, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of both of your works, to me, speaks to how community really is folded into each and every facet, right? And so you said you're an artist, an activist, and you're an educator and a performer. So let's talk a little bit about that and how, your art plays out in everyday life. So when you're out in the world, what does that look like, and how do you activate?
I just wanted to, before I answer that question, just to say I appreciate you being an educator and speaking on the importance of education, and also like the people who also appreciate works but also educating themselves on the culture. Like before I was saying, seeing on TikTok how mainstream certain, cultures are now becoming, and how technology influences but also capitalizes off of different cultures, and how people don't, it's hard because it's like, oh, I'm happy people are seeing my culture. I'm happy ube is trending. That's great. Like, I want people to go to those restaurants and for those cultures to capitalize off of those things. But when people don't necessarily, I guess, learn like, oh, why is fufu like this starchy thing, or why is Afro beats like, why are those beats so similar to different hip hop things? Like, why am I drawn to this like now? But this has always been here. I think my work also plays onto that too. Once I started educating myself, I felt like my suppressed, because I did suppress my African identity. I wanted to be an African American, to assimilate in this culture. But it's so funny. That's such an interesting thing to say as an American now. America is such... Anyways, but yeah, I just appreciate that history is so important in your work. Research is so important in your work. And you're also very cognizant of the cultures with which you're tapping into. Because I think there are a lot of people out there right now, and for centuries, who have done this and have constantly stolen from different people. I mean, Picasso's Cubism was started from African masquerades, and that wasn't really talked about until later on. And so I really do appreciate that. I apologize.
No,
for the
roll with it.
I do. Okay, and you said how does art play out in my everyday?
In your everyday life, like as an activist, educator, right?
I mean, it's funny because we actually met. Yeah. We linked back up because of my social media, and I'm on Instagram, and after school, I got my own studio because I knew I needed to continue my practice and be able to sort of have a distinction between my living area and where I'm creating. Because it's creating has been fun for me ever since I was a child, but now it's like, okay, how do you merge the two of like creative and business. So, and that is something that I am constantly tackling as, you know, a person who just graduated from UArts last year. So when I got my studio, I mean, I go in that place and like I'm trying to figure out what my creative process is, like coming and being, you know, consistent, having boundaries, budgeting, but and it's a lot to tackle. But when I play my Afro beats, I play my Latinx, whatever it is, I feel like it's so ancestral. It's like music makes me feel, because I actually have imposter syndrome with my work. Sometimes I'll do stuff and I'm like, oh, I did that. Okay, I don't know how, but I did it. But when I remember, because if I think too much, if I think too hard about what I'm doing, I'll never do it. So when I put the music on, I just tell myself to break it down. Like with painting, you got to see its values, you got to see the shadows. So when I break it down to just like ABCs, it's so simple for me. And listening to people like Asheke or Rema, it's like these people are continuously making and representing this culture. I'm like, I have a place in that too. And that makes me feel very powerful. And then something just happens and my hands just start doing whatever. I don't know. I can't really tell you how it happens, but it does. And I think that's how I do it in my day to day, listening to music, still having my communities with after UArts. I still meet with my different professors. They come and do studio visits with me, and I still ask them, like, I think UArts being closed and everything that happened, it wasn't necessarily the walls, it was the people that made that space what it was. And I think I would not even be the artist that I am without my educators, without my teachers saying, okay, you have technique. What does that mean? What are you going to do with that? So yeah, I'm constantly in conversations with my peers and things like that, or even doing things like this, because I know it's going to go out to the public and people are going to see that. And I want people to know this is how I'm doing it. You can do just the same, you know? So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, I love it. And I've also, when I see those videos of you listening to music, because you put the music in there.
Yeah.
I'm vibing. It's so good.
It's good
music.
music.
Amazing. And I see joy. And it's like this release. And I'm seeing you just like create in the moment.
Exactly.
Even if I can't see the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting what Prince is speaking about in terms of like the, you know, the tension with commodifying and consuming art, right? Yeah. Because we, like, as artists, you know, we are making and we're expressing and we're connecting, collaborating through the creative practice. But there is the necessary side of also being able to live with and around that. So you have this tension around, you know, what does it mean to be to commodify or to have to offer your art for consumption, and so transaction is a part of that process. I think that for me, you know, and being a musician, you know, doing gigs it's very transactional. So when I wear the hat as a cultural producer or I wear the hat as an educator, there is a form of transaction that happens, but what I'm really trying to do is also develop relationships that go beyond just like exchanging money for an experience, but like, you know, the experience that I'm trying to open or endow upon a student is a form of, is an opportunity for transformation, is an opportunity to kind of like of self-discovery and self-realization. And so facilitating that, sometimes it's verbal, but sometimes when it's paired with the artistic practice or bringing them in to discovery. Like when I'm working in a classroom, it's not about training someone to become a professional musician. It's about, okay, how is this practice opening up a portal for them to then learn something new about themselves or learn something about each other, especially if it's a community-based tradition, right? And so when I'm also curating, I'm also interested in not just paying a musician or performing artist for being on stage, which is an important thing to do and value their work in that way, but also what are the variety of ways in which we can engage this artist in their practice, in their insights, and to offer artists other resources other than just financial, because we are always working, you know, with so many constraints and so many limitations that when you can open the door to facilitate exchanges between each other, right, that is almost as valuable. No, you can't necessarily buy groceries with it, but that in terms of feeding the artistic process and then feeding the ways in which we're thinking about our work, I think those relationships are really fundamental. You know, so that can happen, in my case, that can happen in a classroom. That can also just happen like, you know, being out in the park and listening, you know, to something, or it can happen on stage. And so, and it can happen with my kids. You know, I remember being in the car when taking one of my sons to school, and it was raining, and the windshield wipers, and I'm seeing him like nod his head and like, you know, to the ticking and the talking of the windshield, right? And so there's things about the ways in which we listen to the world that I think we lose as we get older. And so part of what we do as artists is remind people that we are connected to all these elements and it's like these natural ways, and we get taught out of that, or we grow out of it, so to speak, or we're taught that it's not appropriate to connect. And I think that's the power of being an artist, is like to remind people that they do have permission to engage with themselves, to engage with each other, to engage with natural space, to engage with time in ways that they, you know, are not conventionally allowed to do or asked to do. So I think that's a really important part of that kind of, you know, opening liberatory spaces for people, for themselves and also and to engage with each other.
How the city influences you, and how do you want to influence the city?
I mean, Philadelphia it's where I consider, I didn't grow up in Philadelphia, but it's definitely where I consider home. It's where I've been here the longest. I've been lived in Philly longer than anywhere else. The communities that I've been a part of have been incredibly important to my journey as an artist. It's interesting, Prince is talking about UArts. I didn't go to UArts, but many years I was an accompanist in the dance program. Then I also taught in the music department for several years. But it was through university arts that I first encountered a group of musicians that were playing for a Brazilian dance class on Monday nights. And so those guys were the ones that I started playing with, and they had a band, Allo Brazil. And so Allo Brazil, you know, I became, you know, a year after I got out of from school, I moved to Philly, working for a year in the district, teaching in literacy in the school district. Left that and started doing, you know, different kinds of freelance work, but joined Allo Brazil, became the director, and, you know, that nucleus has been, you know, where I've been able to engage in the rich traditions of music and percussion in Philadelphia. Through them, I met Spoken Hand Percussion Orchestra, which was a big part of my musical development, and understanding, developing a deeper understanding of different cultural music traditions through these relationships that I was building. And so Philadelphia has been incredibly transformative for me in terms of my development as an artist, and the ways in which I've been able to build community, having a capoeira community here that I've been a member of that group since the late 90s. And so for me, it's like, okay, how, again, going back to this idea of reciprocity, how can I then support, how can I activate spaces through my artistry, through my performance? How can I support my colleagues in music? How can I work with young people to open doors that they didn't think were possible? You know, I think increasingly as we are living in more and more a digitized age with technology, the disconnect with certain aspects of art making, especially in music, especially as a percussionist, everything is sampled, everything is digitized. So like when I'm in a room and I can actually play and show young people that these sounds actually come from actual instruments, that each of these instruments have a story, that they're portals for storytelling, that there's a lineage that's involved. It's not just about pressing a button. I think for me that's been really important, and to garner that energy and that sort of the consciousness around what does it mean to be a musician, what does it mean to be engaging in a community-based tradition, and what does it mean to activate these spaces in the various ways of storytelling that that we do, and whether it's visual, sonic, movement-based, or whatever. So Philly has been really a rich place for me, developing it as an artist, and being fortunately one of the members of the cohort of the Philadelphia Cultural Treasures last year was incredibly affirming. And just I'm still like processing that, and like the folks that I'm in that cohort with, I have such profound respect for. Some of us have been on that grind for decades and been doing this work. And so yeah, I mean it is just a name, just a fellowship, but it's also a mark to recognize, especially the BIPOC artists, and the work that a lot of times all our work is intertwined with activism, goes undervalued and underrecognized.
The community, like you were saying, like I sold my first painting after graduating from UArts and becoming a Black Artist Fellow and all these different things. And I think all of that, like in my work, I try to right now with my prints that I sell, or even some of my paintings, with everything that's going on with immigration, how can I donate back to that organization to help other immigrants? So I think going back and giving back to the city that honestly still feeds me is very important, like you were saying. So yeah, community is so big. I found so much of my friends and my professors and even my family through here. So I'm very grateful for Philly.
Thank you both so much for sharing so much of your heart, your story, and your passions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation to
Yeah,
speak.
thank you. It's an honor.
It was great to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Obrigada.
Nada.
You can get more information about the artists on the handles listed on the screen.
And you can find murals across the city that honor leaders, such as Gloria Césares by Michelle Angela Ortiz on muralarts.org.
Thank you so much for joining us today. You can check out more of our work at intimedia.org, and you can watch or listen to past episodes on Spotify or YouTube.
And we'd love to hear from you, so please tag us, share at News by Inti Media.
Ashe.
Nos vemos.